Hello, Richard. Where did you hide the gifts? I've looked all over the house, but I can't find them anywhere. When I mentioned the presents, I noticed a worried expression on Richard's face. Curious, I inquired, Richard, what did you do with them? With some hesitation, he admitted, I sold them. Stunned, I pressed, why would you sell the gifts? Richard explained, I needed the money, so I decided to sell them. Besides, those gifts wouldn't have been useful to you anyway. I was incredulous. Are you out of your mind? Those gifts were crucial for our budget, especially the essentials for the baby. Disregarding my concerns, Richard retorted, why are you getting worked up over these minor things? The gifts belong to me since my parents gave them to me. I have the right to do whatever I want with them. They're mine. Greetings. I'm Laura Smith, a 31-year-old nurse married to Richard, a businessman who owns fishery farms. Richard's farms catch and send fish to different locations. At first, our life was happy, brimming with Richard's lively energy. But everything took a turn when Richard experienced a major setback in his business. The ship carrying fish from his farm capsized in a storm. Richard, a small business owner, was deeply affected by the setback, plunging him into severe sadness. I did my utmost to comfort him emotionally, but my savings fell short to aid his recovery. Despite my demanding job as a nurse, I endeavored to assist him by preparing his favorite meals and taking him to his preferred places. For weeks, Richard immersed himself in video games, neglecting domestic duties. As a nurse, I worked extended shifts and managed household chores, even on overtime days. Richard displayed no inclination to assist, leaving me feeling frustrated. While I acknowledge the difficulties in business, dealing with the aftermath necessitates awareness and shared responsibility. I may not be an expert in business, but I understand that when things go wrong, it's crucial to improve efficiency, reassess, and come up with new plans. Instead of getting stuck on setbacks, spending too much time being upset could make the business problems worse. Even though I didn't talk to Richard about these ideas earlier, I gave him the time he needed to deal with his loss. After approximately a month, I gathered the courage to discuss the matter with him. Hey Richard, I understand you've been a bit low since that setback, but perhaps it's a good idea to look ahead. Instead of getting stuck in what happened, shouldn't we try to figure out solutions? Continuously being sad might just add more difficulties for you. He reacted just as I expected, accusing me of being insensitive and self-centered when I tried to discuss business rules instead of providing emotional support. Despite his response, I wanted to express my viewpoint. Sweetheart, I understand I might come across as straightforward, but I truly believe dwelling on this setback is harming your business. I care about you and want only positive outcomes for your business because I love you. Richard wasn't happy with my words. He chose to escape into video games with his headphones on. It took more than a month for him to get back to his usual business routine, and I felt relieved that things were finally getting back on track. I noticed a shift in Richard's daily routine. His arrival home became unpredictable, sometimes well past midnight, other times in the morning, and occasionally not at all. When I questioned him about the erratic schedule, he brushed me off with a sarcastic remark. Businessmen don't adhere to shifts, you know. We control our time and work. His arrogant response left me pondering the underlying reasons. Several months later, Richard faced another setback, yet this time he didn't sink into the sofa in sorrow. The transformation was evident. He no longer exuded happiness. Instead, stress had become a constant companion, and an inexplicable sense of urgency seemed to govern his actions. One day, Richard approached me with a polite request, expressing his financial strain and seeking assistance for his business. Startled by the sudden plea, I explained my own financial situation, having shouldered the responsibility of running the household during the challenging period following his business setback. My response didn't sit well with Richard, who wore a disgusted expression. Feeling a twinge of guilt, I reconsidered my decision. Reflecting on my carefree lifestyle in my 50s, where I had spent most of my savings on travel and exploration, I realized that perhaps I could make a sacrifice for my husband. As a married couple, supporting each other became a priority. Thus, I decided to part with the money earmarked for my upcoming trip to Hawaii, hoping it would aid Richard in stabilizing his business. Unfortunately, the anticipated improvement never materialized. During this time, I discovered I was pregnant, a moment of immense joy. However, Richard's happiness was tinged with concern, leaving me puzzled. Despite my excitement, Richard seemed worried about providing a decent life for the baby with his unstable income. I reassured him, asserting that the timing was perfect. Despite my optimism, Richard remained uneasy, expressing his apprehensions about taking on the responsibilities of parenthood. Dismissing it as typical first pregnancy jitters, I believed that time would alleviate his concerns. To be honest, I was worried about Richard's inconsistent earnings. Supporting a family and ensuring a decent life for our child is challenging when relying on a single income stream. While I couldn't solely depend on my own income, I hoped that when Richard became a father, he'd realize his responsibilities, and our situation would get better. Unfortunately, instead of taking work more seriously, Richard appeared to be increasingly careless each day. Borrowing money became a regular occurrence, always for urgent and seemingly unique reasons, whether it was to pay his employees or invest in a new type of fish. Despite feeling frustrated, I held back from drastic actions because of the upcoming baby. Instead, I decided to minimize my interactions with Richard and concentrated on looking after myself and the baby. Initially, I didn't mind assisting him, but his last 2-minute appeals transformed into outright demands. What used to be polite requests with apologies turned into direct statements like, "Laura, send me $1,000 as soon as possible." I attempted to comprehend the reasons behind his growing financial needs, but it consistently traced back to accumulating debt from small business loans, accompanied by escalating interest. Rejecting his requests triggered immature outbursts. Door slamming, cutlery rattling, and disdainful expressions persisted until I yielded. Richard's demeanor grew more insufferable, particularly in the 6 months of my pregnancy. My in-laws organized a baby shower, and I appreciated their backing. I expressed my gratitude sincerely upon receiving considerate presents from them, their acquaintances, and family members. The gathering provided a respite from months of tension and despondency, enabling me to have a pleasant moment with everyone. I felt immense joy receiving the thoughtful gifts from our guests, as they provided us with all the essential items the baby would need in the initial months. Given our tight budget, obtaining these necessities would have been a significant financial burden. The next morning, I was surprised to find the living room empty, and the gifts were nowhere to be seen. Assuming Richard might have stored them in the storeroom, I checked, only to find no sign of any gift. Richard wasn't home, and when I called him, he didn't answer. Upon his return, I questioned Richard about the whereabouts of the gifts. To my dismay, he confessed to selling them. Shocked, I asked why he would do such a thing, and he callously replied that the gifts were of no use to us. Expressing my disappointment and frustration, I explained that those gifts were crucial items for the baby, including clothes, a crib, blankets, strollers, and toiletries. I couldn't understand why he would sell something so essential, especially when we were on a tight budget. Richard seemed indifferent and dismissive, claiming that the gifts were given by my parents, and therefore he could do anything with them. I argued that the gifts were intended for the baby, not for him to sell and fill his pockets. In tears, I pleaded with him, emphasizing how the gifts had saved us money we couldn't afford to spend again. Richard, unapologetic, insisted he would get everything we needed when the baby arrived. Skeptical, I asked how he planned to do that without the necessary funds, but he seemed unfazed by the financial challenges ahead. Richard glanced downward, and an immediate realization struck me. He was lacking the funds. I rolled my eyes and pressed, "Hand over the earnings from those gifted items you sold." "I don't have it," he replied. Adopting a firm tone, I inquired, "Where did the money go then?" Defensively, he asserted, "I invested it in my business." Frustrated, I exclaimed, "Seriously, Richard? Spare me your lectures. I'm through with you. You're a constantly gloomy individual who complains about every minor setback." His words fueled my anger. Richard had surpassed all bounds, and I couldn't contain my frustration. "What's your deal? You contribute zilch to household expenses, hardly lift a finger around here, and thrive on my earnings. And now you have the audacity to utter such things? Instead of assisting, you exacerbate my troubles. If you're unhappy with me, why not consider parting ways? I just want to enjoy some peace in my own home. Being in your presence feels stifling and unpleasant. I'm too tired to argue anymore. Richard's actions are becoming irrational." Holding back my frustration, I retreated to my room, forcefully closing the door behind me. I sensed something was amiss with him, suspecting a possible affair or financial indiscretion. That night, driven by curiosity, I decided to investigate. I discreetly added a sleeping aid to Richard's soup, ensuring he fell into a deep slumber. With him sound asleep, I used his fingerprints to unlock his phone, meticulously examining emails and chat messages. Following an hour of digging into the matter, I finally uncovered the crucial element of the puzzle. Expecting to stumble upon messages and images related to an affair, I was taken aback by a more alarming revelation. Richard was entangled in illicit drug dealings. The shock hit me hard. It began after his initial setback, prompting him to delve into the unlawful realm of smuggling drugs via his fishing enterprise. Within the fishing community, there's a knowledge that illegal substances are sometimes concealed within fish and meat cargo. I had been oblivious to this shadowy aspect of his business. The email revealed that Richard had reservations about getting involved in this venture initially. However, the promise of making money quickly proved too tempting for him to resist. The persuasions of the dealers seemed like a remedy for his business troubles. Richard saw it as a temporary solution to bounce back from his financial setbacks. Without a doubt, the attraction of swift cash became more powerful than the appeal of drugs, pulling him further into the world of illegal activities. As his involvement grew, he began to take pleasure in the effortless earnings, which fueled a sudden sense of arrogance. This unexpected venture into illegality became the trigger for Richard's downfall, leading him down a dangerous path. The subsequent setback, worsened by a shipwreck, proved to be even more disastrous. The sea not only took away the fish, but also consumed the illicit substances. Now haunted by drug dealers seeking compensation for the losses, Richard had no choice but to ensure the secure transport of these items. Learning about all of this during Richard's talk with the dealer, I, being a nurse, couldn't bear to stay with someone involved in criminal activities. Seeing the pain inflicted by drug abuse, I deemed it morally and ethically unacceptable. To strengthen my stance, I collected the essential evidence without leaving any signs of tampering with his phone and then handed it back. Sleep evaded me that night. The next morning, while Richard was still in slumber, I packed my belongings and departed the residence, finding solace at the home of a reliable friend and colleague. Afraid to lodge a police report by myself, I worried that revealing Richard's actions could implicate numerous individuals. If he or his associates caught wind of my role, it could lead to significant problems. I swiftly reached out to my colleague's cousin, who happened to be a lawyer. He recommended that I share the information with the police anonymously. Through an impartial inquiry, if my evidence held up, the authorities would launch the case and apprehend the suspect independently. I chose to be honest and followed the advice of my lawyer, who had connections in the police department. Anonymously, I provided all the evidence to the police. On the other hand, when Richard woke up in the morning, he noticed I had left the house with some of my belongings. Misinterpreting the situation, he thought I was upset about the gifts he had given me. In his text, he assumed I was seeking an apology and expected me to return home. Ignoring his messages, I was content that he jumped to this conclusion. It allowed me the time to carry out my plan without arousing Richard's suspicion. Being 6 months pregnant, I faced emotional turmoil and fear. If Richard discovered my involvement, I worried he might harm me or the baby. During the week-long police investigation, I stayed with a colleague for safety. After a week, the lawyer informed me that the police had verified my evidence, leading to criminal charges against Richard and a few others. Uncertain whether to feel relief or sadness about Richard's impending imprisonment, I received a call from him a few hours later. Anxious, I answered, wondering if he knew the truth. In a fearful tone, Richard explained that he had been arrested on drug dealing charges and claimed innocence. Despite his plea for help, I felt a wave of relief knowing he was unaware of my involvement. Richard, I can't have any connection to illegal activities. Forget about bail. Our association is over. I'm initiating divorce proceedings. I quickly hung up, not allowing him a chance to reply. This was a step outlined by the attorney's strategy. After Richard's arrest, I could seek a divorce, highlighting my separation from any criminal involvement. This strategy would take both Richard and his associates by surprise, ensuring my well-being. When Richard's parents learned about his arrest, they also chose not to assist him, concerned about the harm to their family's reputation by supporting a criminal. This situation facilitated the smooth execution of my plan. The divorce proceedings wrapped up without complications. It's been 2 years since that event, and I've welcomed a lovely baby girl into the world. Looking back on those moments, I applaud myself for following my instincts and severing ties with Richard. If I hadn't, he might still be causing financial strain, or even worse, posing a danger to both me and my child. Wrongdoers have no moral values, and the secret of me sharing all the proof with the police is kept confidential among my co-worker, the attorney, and me. Presently, I'm staying at my parents' place, and I'm getting financial assistance for my child from Richard's parents until he's possibly set free, though that doesn't seem likely in the near future. Opting for fast cash may appear like a simple fix, but more frequently than not, it steers one towards a risky route of challenges and criminal activities.